J.J. Middleton was the president of the chapter up there, full gospel businessman again. And J.J. and I are talking, and Ron Wyatt, we're talking before he's to get up and give his presentation. And a Catholic priest that I had led to the Lord the night before, prayed over him, got him delivered, got him filled with the Holy Ghost, was there that night in civilian clothes, and he come walking up, and he says to Ron Wyatt, he says, Mr. Wyatt, it's nice to meet you. I've seen you on Henry's video. He says, I'm Father so-and-so. And Ron says, well, he says, it's nice to meet you, sir. He says, I personally don't call anybody Father but my Father in heaven. But he says, I respect you. You're a minister then, correct? He says, yes, I'm a Catholic priest. And he said, well, I wouldn't know it. He said, well, I dress in civilian clothes. Well, that conversation went on. He said, but I want you to know something. There's a man out the door that has 54 pages of criticisms against you. And he's selling them for $5. He's calling you a total fraud. And he says he's a doctorate also of theology and archaeology. And he's telling everybody that comes in, you're a total fraud. And Ron looks at this Catholic priest and says to him, is that right? And he says, yeah. He says, well, go on in and get yourself a chair. I says, listen, I've got a chair there. Sit down right beside mine. You'll see my little briefcase sitting there. There's a chair saved for you. You said you were coming tonight. It's at my right hand. You can have it right. He said, well, thank you, Henry. So he was right up front with me. And the Catholic priest was right beside me. And JJ heads out and says, well, and Ron says, how long have we got before the meeting starts? And JJ says, well, we got about 12, 15 minutes before we introduce you. Ron says, okay, I'll be right back. And I see Ron looking around. I see an exit door. The entrance door is over here. I see one down at the end of a hall. I know where he's going. I said, can I stick with you? He says, sure. Where are you going? He says, you'll find out. He goes out the exit door. We walk in a foot of snow all around to the front door. And this man says, I have 54 pages here proving Mr. Wyatt is a total fraud. Are you people going to hear him? And Ron says, well, I certainly hope so. And he didn't know Ron or me. The guy didn't. That's how thorough investigation he made. And Ron Wyatt says, well, how much you asking? $5? Ron takes $5 out and says, sure, I'd like to have them. And he gives him the $5 and he gives him the 54 pages. And Ron holds it in one hand, puts his other hand and says, by the way, I'm Ron Wyatt. Listen, I'll be up in just a few minutes speaking. I'm going to show a video. Obviously, you don't know me. But he says, I want to invite you to come and sit right up front with this man right here. So he seats him right at my left hand. And they introduce him, and up he goes up front. And Ron gets up there, he's introduced, he says, listen, and he asked JJ before, he says, I want to do something. Would you allow me to give this man an opportunity to vent his criticisms? Wow. And JJ said, well, we came here to hear you. And Ron said, I know, but you see, he has contaminated people, and it needs to be taken care of. They don't need to leave here with that. So I want to let him come up and ask me any question he wants. And I'll answer it in front of the people. Because I don't know what's in the 54 pages yet. And so JJ agreed. He says, I don't want to do it, but I'll agree to it. So Ron gets up there and says, well, there's a gentleman here. All of you have probably seen him as he come in the door. He has 54 pages. Some of you I see have those pages. I want to give him full opportunity to come up here beside me at the microphone and ask any question he wants. So he came up there and he started speaking his criticisms, and Ron began answering them. And every time he'd say, that's a lie. That's a lie. That's a bold-faced lie. And he went on and on and on, trying to tell his side of it, his 54 pages. And he went on for an hour. This went on for an hour. The Catholic priest at my right hand, Father Pat Ryan is his name, he stands up and he says, sir, he says, I came here to hear Ron Wyatt tonight. Now he says, I also have 2 doctorates. I think I'm a little bit intelligent. You may not like me because I'm a Catholic priest and you're a Baptist minister. I know you have a doctorate, 2 doctorates, but he says, I have 2. But he said, I'd like to make a suggestion. I cannot believe how polite Mr. Wyatt has been standing there beside you, smiling. It shows me which one's really telling the truth. And I think the audience has seen who's really telling the truth.
You can see
You've
from the
cut
fruit.
Mr. Wyatt off again and again and not let him finish answering. You're not here for the truth. You're here for your own agenda. Now, may I make a suggestion that you sit down before you make more of a fool of yourself? And the people jumped up clapping, gave him a standing ovation. And the guy says, oh, and big old J.J. Middleton, the president, stands up, takes his arm and says, because he wasn't going to sit down. He says, now listen, I'm going to give you an opportunity, because he wasn't going to leave that microphone. He took his arm. He wouldn't go with him. He said, I'm going to give you an opportunity to go down here and sit beside Henry and be quiet and listen to his presentation or leave the building. Oh, I'll sit down. So he sit beside me. He sit there with his pen just doodling on the back of one of his 54 pages, just doodling, just scribbling. Never looked up at Ron once, just shaking his head no and just doodling. And when Ron showed his video, he never once looked up at it. And then he got up and walked out. I thought, dear Lord, but that's wrong. He was such a gracious man.